If someone purposely set a building in your village on fire, what would you do? I'd put an arrow in the arsehole who did it, Reed replied. 3 arrows, just in case the first didn't kill him. Liam sighed. Wrong answer. Reed asked. No, Liam answered. Just wondering why the people of the city don't do the same. 'Cause they'd be slaughtered if they did, the woodsman said. A regiment of armsmen and 4 mercenary companies would wipe 'em out in no time. He was pretty sure that wasn't the case. As far as his reconnaissance could make out, there were about 500 Bloomrush armsmen and 1,500 mercenaries in the Bloomrusher. That was sufficient to keep an eye on things and put down small uprisings, but, if the city's 35,000 residents simultaneously rebelled, they could easily drive House Bloomrush's forces into the castle. If the entire city revolts, Liam said, Lord Reginald would lose control in less than a day. Some of the knights and mercenaries are pretty strong, but they'd still be overwhelmed by the sheer number of citizens. It won't happen because there are still options available to the people, Countess Beaumont said from her office. The sort of thing you describe would only happen if they believe there is no other choice. Furthermore, city folk are not a monolith and there are plenty of targets for their anger aside from House Bloomrush. He had seen that much, at least. The unskilled labourers of the city were more likely to turn on the guilds than the nobility, and there was undoubtedly all sorts of history between both individuals and groups of people. There's also the fact that we're facing a famine, Lady Beaumont added. The people already expect a future of extraordinary hardship. This allows House Bloomrush to push them much harder than they usually could. Are people that predictable? Liam grumbled. Predicting specific individual actions might be difficult, the Countess said, but knowing what the average person is capable of and how to limit undesirable behavior isn't. Nobles must consider such issues on a daily basis. Why are you thinking about this, anyway? Reed asked. I thought we wanted our asses out of here as quick as possible. Claire emerged from the office to give the woodsman a smack. You are speaking in Our Lady's presence, she told him. Watch your mouth, Mr. Reed. The maid retreated to the Countess' office, nursing her hand. Is she allowed to do that? The woodsman asked. I have no idea, Liam answered. It was one of the long list of things that women were apparently allowed to do, but men weren't. He had no idea who came up with that list, but everyone seemed to adhere to it. Anyways, Liam said. As much as I'd like to have us out of the city soon, it looks like we won't be able to. Lady Beaumont, how did your meeting with Baroness Ileron go? Not as well as I would have liked, the young noblewoman replied. Not only are her accounts a mess, entire portions of her territory haven't reported their summer harvests, never mind the autumn harvest. What does that mean? It could mean several things, Lady Beaumont said. Baroness Ileron's magistrates could be testing the bounds of their new liege's power or tolerance. Villages may have been plundered or razed by bandits, demi-human tribes, or monsters. A rival lord may have taken control of pieces of her territory. We won't know until we send people to find out. Wouldn't the latter mean war? Liam asked. There's no law against nobles waging war against one another, the Countess answered. In fact, it's to House Bloomrush's benefit that its vassals weaken one another militarily. Of course, they'll intercede if such a contest isn't worth the cost in economic damage. Which would probably never happen. In Riestize, war was the province of nobles and was fought in predetermined battlegrounds to prevent collateral damage to developed territories. That meant 2 opposing forces fought until honor was satisfied. Of course, fighting in a way that wasn't advantageous to the cavalry that Riestize's aristocrats favored was considered dishonorable. If someone's taken a piece of Baroness Ileron's territory, Liam said, does she even have an army to fight with? Countess Beaumont shook her head. She barely has any armsmen. If she were to call for a levy, she doesn't have the people to organize it. Her only real option would be to petition House Bloomrush to support her claim, and that may not achieve the desired result. Why not? Liam asked. Isn't a liege obliged to defend their vassal? On paper, yes. In practice, The worst-case scenario is that the liege determines the petitioner is incapable of ruling their territory and allows the offending noble to take over. If we're talking about two vassals under House Bloomrush, the winner of a court battle like this would be the house that offers the greatest contributions to the realm. So the biggest bribe wins, Reed said. It doesn't have to be an immediate monetary contribution, the Countess said. Vassals can make future concessions to sway the opinion of their liege. So a noble can take over a village, Liam said, then offer half of that village's industrial production as a bribe to their liege so they can keep it. That's one way, yes. But that's basically saying I'll give you half of what I stole. The offender wouldn't use those particular words. Phrasing matters. Also, keep in mind that a liege would never approve of such a takeover if it makes one of their vassals too powerful for their liking. No matter who it benefits, Liam said, it's still wrong. Oh, Liam, Lady Beaumont said endearingly, that upright nature of yours is something I truly adore. However, it's not something that we can realistically follow in our present situation. Liam figured that their present situation would change after he stabbed a few people, but he hadn't been ordered to do so. Not yet, at any rate. What is our present situation, in your opinion? Liam asked. There might be some trouble on the way. Liam rose and walked from the Solars' drawing room to the office. Trouble? What kind of trouble? Countess Highwood arrived in the city sometime in the last few hours. One of House Beaumont's enemies? Liam asked. It's more problematic than that, the Countess answered. They are allies. So it's bad because we can't compete against them for resources? No, the issue lies elsewhere. Liam looked down at the young noblewoman, who fidgeted nervously in her seat. Being vague about it doesn't help us, Liam told her. It's complicated. Lady Beaumont didn't raise her gaze to meet his. More to do with what was going on before I went to Beaumont County than anything else. What were you doing? Liam asked. A long sigh issued from the young noblewoman's lips. Keep in mind that my moves were made in complete ignorance, she answered in a small voice. I thought that my house was in the situation that my late Lord Father suggested to me, so I conducted myself in a manner matching that position of strength. I have no idea what that means, Liam said. It means that I conducted myself as any proper noblewoman would. Rumors flowing from the capital suggested that the leader of this new faction of ours was little more than an oblivious fool. With that in mind, I set about consolidating my own small faction in Bloomrussia in the hopes that I would be recognized as a superior leadership candidate or at least competent enough to oversee matters in the Azalisian marches. So that's why she was removed from the city by the Eight Fingers. Liam's knowledge of the Sorceress Kingdom's designs was limited to what he was briefed on, but what he knew of those designs and the general behavior of the Sorceress Kingdom's top people neatly explained things. They always conveyed themselves arbitrarily, and pieces, which was pretty much everyone beneath them, were expected to perform their designated roles. These expectations, of course, also applied to Countess Beaumont. She was supposed to be one of many oblivious idiots filling the ranks of a faction meant to disrupt the politics of Re-Estais at some point in the future. Showing initiative by acting outside the bounds of her role was not a part of that plan, so she and her co-conspirators were placed somewhere where she wouldn't be able to interfere with the Sorceress Kingdom's designs. The fact that Liam knew so little about Lady Beaumont, or any of the region's nobility, was also a result of how insignificant they were in Lady Albedo's eyes. All right, Liam said, so how will this affect what we're doing now? Without more information, Lady Beaumont replied, I can only offer broad predictions. As the name suggests, House Highwood administers a fief specialized in forestry with some mines, just like House Beaumont. The main difference now is that the Sorceress Kingdom's support has granted us a huge windfall, both with the gains from the materials gathered from the wilderness and ending the Eight Fingers' control over our territory. So this Countess is coming into the city poor, Liam said. The Countess nodded. How poor they'll be will depend on how Countess Highwood negotiates the special reconstruction levy with House Bloomrush. Regardless of the outcome, she'll most certainly come to me for support under the assumption that I still lead our faction. So she'll ask you for food or money? No, the Countess shook her head. She'll avoid any moves that directly expose her weakness. The obvious action for her would be to encourage me to leverage the collective bargaining power of our faction to secure what our members need. Just so we're on the same page here, how big is this faction? Roughly half of the Azalisian marches, perhaps. Liam's mouth fell open. You rallied half of the Azalisian marches behind you without knowing the true state of House Beaumont? It wasn't intentional. Lady Beaumont protested, I didn't mean to mislead anyone, and it's what any noble in my situation would have done. The Battle of Katsa Plains destabilized everything. Old friendships needed to be reaffirmed, and it was a chance to forge new bonds. It's just that everything became far larger than I could have possibly imagined at the time. I don't get how something like this couldn't be intentional, Liam frowned. A tired expression broke through the young noblewoman's mask of composure. After a moment, she looked up at her maid. Claire, fresh tea, if you would. Claire bobbed her head before leaving the solar. Lady Beaumont closed her eyes, not speaking until the maid returned. Once a steaming cup of red tea was placed before her, she breathed in the calming aroma of her drink and gingerly took a sip. I honestly don't think anyone could fault me for my actions, she said. The first thing I did was solidify the friendships between House Beaumont and houses like Ileron. They've traded with us for generations, and any disruption of that trade threatens the survival of our subjects. I guess that's fair, Liam said. How did it get so crazy? The Eight Fingers hosted a function in Rebloom, Russia, similar to what they did in the capital. Lady Albedo didn't make an appearance, nor did anyone of any importance, so it was a meaningless and empty affair from the outset. Liam frowned. I think I missed something. The lack of significance to anything had the effect of illuminating my activities, the Countess said. Honestly, it could have been anyone. The important part was that someone was doing something beyond empty posturing and everyone else latched onto it. Do you understand my meaning? All right, so the fact that something was happening attracted everyone's attention, Liam said. But how did that lead to whatever happened? Because it's what we're born and bred to do, Liam, the young noblewoman said. Even those whose parents didn't have the means to properly raise all of their children understood that something was going on, something that they should also take part in. What I was doing was far from anything grand, but it was essential for everyone involved. It was a chance to gain experience, a chance to experience the tiniest bit of success. I do not think it too different for those of other vocations. Except a guy in another vocation doesn't affect hundreds of thousands of people doing what they do. So you just did a bunch of normal things and it ended up becoming huge, but it's still made up of normal things, right? Yes and no, the young noblewoman replied. Transactionally, you have the regular business that the houses would conduct, the normal things. It's the new web of relationships that we must be careful with. On top of being based on erroneous assumptions, we're talking about a very real accumulation of political power that House Bloomrush usually wouldn't tolerate. I can only guess at how things will play out. I need to ask Lady Wagner about this. He had no clue where to begin with what Countess Beaumont had shared. Would House Bloomrush act against them? How much protection did their association with the Eight Fingers provide? What would the addition of a faction mean for the experiment with Lady Beaumont? A knock sounded from the entrance to the solar. Claire glanced at the Countess, who nodded in response. Yes, what is it? The maid said as she opened the door. One of Reed's woodsmen stood in the corridor outside, clutching a dripping leather cap in his hands. He looked about uncertainty until Reed rose to his feet. What's going on? Reed asked. Some carriages are parking in the street out front, the woodsmen answered. Got house sigils on 'em. No one's come out yet. A long sigh rose from Lady Beaumont's office. Did you know they were coming? Liam asked, was that why you brought all of this up? I knew it would happen eventually, the young noblewoman replied, but not this quickly. I thought it would take more time for more of my peers to arrive in the city. The Countess rose with a whisper of her long skirts. She tentatively looked out of her office window with a frown on her tired face. "That's strange," she murmured. "How long has it been since those carriages arrived?" "Couldn't be more than 5 minutes, my lady," the woodsman replied. Liam joined Lady Beaumont at the window. The tops of several carriages could be seen over the estate's hedge, parked along the street. Several thoroughly soaked footmen stood at their stations on and around the vehicles, but there was no sign of their lords or ladies. "Are they waiting for the rain to stop?" Liam asked. "That's unlikely," the Countess answered. "They could have taken turns disembarking at the front entrance." "Turns? Oh, I believe I know what's going on." "What?" "Going by the livery of the footman, not all of these carriages came together. They probably rushed here upon seeing others do the same. Now they're trying to determine the order of precedence between them." "This isn't a party," Liam said. "They've turned it into one," the Countess said. "Mr. Reed, have your off-duty men move the retinue's belongings out of the Great Hall before you post them around the manor." "Ah, where do we put our stuff?" "They can move their things to the empty servants' quarters and return them to the Great Hall once our guests leave. Claire, see if the cook can't come up with some refreshments." "Yes, my lady." As the Countess and her staff scrambled to make their preparations, Liam went outside to take a closer look at the parked carriages. He couldn't identify the sigils upon them, nor could he figure out which vehicles harbored the highest-ranked nobles. "Why are they just sitting here?" Liam asked. "Beats me," one of the woodsmen posted at the gate said. "They're talkin', I guess." Liam peered at the carriages along the street. "Talking how?" "They've got some poor guy going back and forth between two of the there he is." A miserable-looking footman in yellow and brown livery appeared from around the bend. Liam and the woodsman's heads turned in unison, following the footman as he jogged by without a word before disappearing up the street. "Have any of these guys said anything?" Liam asked. "Nope." "This is stupid. At least it bought Countess Beaumont time to get ready." The footman went back and forth a dozen more times before it finally seemed that things were settled. From up the street, the sound of approaching hooves grew steadily over the pouring rain. A black carriage came around the bend, bearing a single plaque with a black horse on checky sable and argent. The footman driving the carriage looked down at them, managing a prideful look despite the rain streaming down his soaked uniform. "Count Zachary Leasdale Rayleigh is here to see Lady Beaumont," the footman told him. "House Rayleigh should have done us the courtesy of calling ahead," Liam said. The driver pointedly ignored him, looking expectantly at the still closed gate. What did that mean? Since so much time had been spent determining rank between the visiting nobles, did the footman's behavior mean that House Rayleigh considered itself above House Beaumont? A second carriage rolled in from the opposite direction, stopping right behind the first. The other vehicles parked on the street started moving as well. Reed's men sent questioning looks in Liam's direction. Liam looked over his shoulder through the bars of the gate, finding Claire and a dozen woodsmen lined up at the entrance of the manor. "Open the gate," Liam said. He rushed to the manor's great hall, which had been hastily rearranged to accommodate the unexpected guests. Lady Beaumont sat at the head of the chamber, her slender fingers idly tapping the polished oaken tabletop before her. "We just started letting them in," Liam said. "The first carriage acted pretty rude." "Rude?" the Countess asked. "In what way?" "They announced themselves and wouldn't answer us. Count Rayleigh was the guy." A furrow creased the young noblewoman's brow. "Rayleigh? Why would a count come in first?" "Because he thought he was the most important person attending." Liam guessed. "What?" Lady Beaumont blinked. No, that's not how it works for functions at this level. Normally, the most important guests arrive last. Maybe he forgot. Is he a part of this faction of yours?" "No, he wasn't involved with us before. His behavior is also troubling." "Was he at that party the Eight Fingers hosted?" "He was, but he didn't get caught up in the excitement that I caused. As far as I could tell, The man just watched us from a distance and he didn't visit me at any point afterwards. In terms of House Rayleigh's influence, something must have changed while I was away. Its holdings are agricultural, so Lord Rayleigh may be using that as a way to force his way to the top. What is he going to do? It stands to reason that he'll use his surplus grain to win several nobles to his side and take steps to become a major player in the faction. Given his behavior outside, he may even believe he can wrest leadership from me. Yet again, Liam pondered the ridiculousness of the situation. How did something as simple as trading wood for grain explode into a web of relationships spanning most of the Azalesian marches? How would things look by the end of the gathering? Maybe you should just let him have it, Liam said. Then we can get out of here. I doubt it will be so easy, Lady Beaumont replied. Even if I relinquish leadership, I'm still the former leader. That makes me a potential threat to be suppressed, which makes securing what we need all the more difficult. Is there any easy way out of this mess? Staying in control of the faction is the easy way. But that doesn't get you out, it just gets you stuck. The young noblewoman quietly looked up at him for several moments. Liam, she said, it's clear that you consider all this a hindrance. However, if House Beaumont's affairs were in order, I would have been more than happy being stuck. Any noble would if the opportunity arose. He wasn't so sure about that. At the least, Lady Zaradnik did her best to avoid entangling herself in that kind of stuff. The shadow of movement in the corridor outside caught Liam's eye. Reed appeared at the entrance. Behind him was a queue of well-dressed men and women. The first to enter was a blonde-haired man of modest height and build, who smiled slightly as Reed fumbled his way through announcing him. His blue-grey eyes scanned the great hall as he made his way to the dais at its head. Lady Beaumont rose to her feet with a pleasant smile. Count Rayleigh, she said, it has been too long. Countess Beaumont, the nobleman replied. I couldn't help but notice your lack of proper household staff. I only intended to stay for as long as my business demanded, the Countess replied. Imagine my surprise upon discovering the myriad of challenges that now face us. Please, have a seat. Count Rayleigh froze with one foot on the dais, his smile vanishing. His host had not gestured to a seat at the head of the hall beside her, but to the table below and to the left. Liam expected him to ascend the dais anyway given his actions so far, but he wordlessly went to his assigned place. Reed's voice sounded from the entrance again, announcing the next guest. Countess Highwood, a shorter girl with blonde ringlets, breathlessly swept into the hall. Beaumont. Thank the gods you've returned to the city. I wasn't aware that you had arrived from the south, Countess Highwood, Lady Beaumont said. It was just this afternoon, Lady Highwood replied. I heard rumors of a disastrous harvest across the north, so I came to see what could be done. Then I arrived in the city and found that all the warehouses had burnt down. And Lord Reginald, oh, Beaumont, we have so much to discuss. I'm sure everyone attending the gathering this evening shares the same concerns, Lady Beaumont said. Shall we wait until everyone is settled down? Yes, of course. Countess Beaumont gestured to the table below the dais and to the right. The other noblewoman blinked in surprise, but nodded and went to her place after glancing at Count Rayleigh. Liam committed each noble's appearance to memory as they entered the hall. Their seating arrangement reflected their relationship with House Beaumont, with members of her faction sitting at the right table and everyone else on the left. The numbers were about even, with just over 20 guests in attendance. The low din of discussion quieted as Countess Beaumont rose to her feet. Well, the timing of this gathering was unexpected, but I suppose it had to happen at some point. Welcome, everyone. You'll have to forgive the limited hospitality given the city's circumstances. The city's circumstances are the least of our concerns, Count Rayleigh gestured empathetically. Disaster has befallen the north and the results of that disaster will soon come for us. We must prepare to defend our food stores from the waves of outlaws that will inevitably appear from without and within. I resent your insinuation, Lord Rayleigh, Countess Highwood frowned. If there is a rise in banditry in our territories, It will be because you and similarly minded lords have closed your granaries to us. Is that true, Lord Rayleigh? Lady Beaumont asked. The Count snorted. Hardly. All we ask for is fair trade. Fair trade? Countess Highwood half rose from her seat. You and your collaborators are demanding double last year's prices. Between that and the special tax for construction materials that Lord Reginald has levied upon us, feeding our people has become an impossible task. Your relationship with House Bloomrush is your own business, Count Rayleigh said dismissively. As for myself and my collaborators, we must attend to our own fiefs. They will undoubtedly be the main target of any outlaws over the winter. The increased price of grain is necessary for hiring the security required to turn away the raids that will inevitably occur. Countess Highwood sent an exasperated look at Countess Beaumont. It seemed like the exchange wasn't going well for her. Count Rayleigh was correct that every noble prioritized their fiefs. Rulers of lands specialized in forestry and mining had little to offer that would help defend against the threats they faced. Aren't you overestimating the threat, Lord Rayleigh? Countess Beaumont said, the coming famine will undoubtedly lead to a rise in banditry, but House Bloomrush would hardly let an army of outlaws roam the land unchecked, bringing starvation and crippling our industries. And how would they know? Count Rayleigh asked. A village a day away from Bloomrush could be raided and the raiders would be long gone before any help arrives. Unless House Bloomrush spreads its forces throughout the Azalisian marches, which it won't, every fief must see to its own defense. The woodland territories could levy forces to assist with that defense, Countess Beaumont suggested. It would be far cheaper than hiring mercenaries. And far less reliable, Count Rayleigh replied. A peasant militia is just as likely to flee as fight in the face of aggressors. Then I must wonder why you and all those who sit with you have come, Countess Beaumont said. You are clearly not here to cooperate with us. We are here to show that the Lords of the Lowlands stand in solidarity, Count Rayleigh said. There is no scheme that you and your friends can come up with to lower our prices for grain. In fact, you should take advantage of our generous offer before the deteriorating situation forces us to increase them once again. All at once, the great hall exploded into an uproar. Lords and ladies alike shot to their feet, shouting across the chamber at one another. Liam looked back and forth, rapidly losing track of everything being said. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this. Okay, is that everything? Everything I can remember. I can single out conversations in a busy market, but following a dozen arguments at once is a different thing entirely. Are you sure I should be the one doing this? Don't worry, you've been doing a great job so far. I'll sort out everything you've told me before sending the next report to Lady Albedo. She's gonna have to figure out what she wants to do with this. A quiet sigh came over the message spell. I hope she figures out what she wants to do soon. Things are getting more and more messy over here. The message spell cut off. Liam had gone through 7 message scrolls to deliver his latest report and it didn't seem like there was anything more to say, so she tossed the parchment in her hand to the table in front of her. Across the table, Florine picked up the page and added it to the others. Her best friend's amber eyes went back and forth as she scanned its contents. I suppose this is about as expected, Florine said. Except for the faction thing, Leanne said. Actually, no. Something like that's pretty normal, it's the fact that it didn't get reported by the 8 Fingers that's odd. Do you think a criminal syndicate would be so fastidious? Florine asked. No, Leanne answered, but I do think they're scared senseless of Lady Albedo. You know how she is. I do, Florine replied, but I don't think outsiders understand her. That includes all of the collaborators she's wrangled in Re-Estize. To them, she's whatever their imaginations can conjure about a demon working for the undead sovereign of the Kingdom of Darkness. Hasn't she complained to you about them before? Not in as many words. It's likely that the 8 Fingers are so terrified of her that they're more likely to keep any problems to themselves than risk her wrath by reporting them. The information gathered by Liam and the other intelligence agents dispatched to Re-Estize has shown as much. As Florine mentioned, Those outside of the Sorcerer's Kingdom didn't know Albedo. While they may have feared the demon's wrath after reporting failures, complications, or general trouble, the opposite was actually true. Like Lady Shiltir and the other members of the Sorcerer's Kingdom's royal court, she didn't punish people for doing what they were supposed to be doing. Not doing one's duty, however. Not that members of a crime syndicate would have anything like duty in mind. Clara emerged from her cabin door nearby. The Countess of Corlin was adorned in the pastel hues of a summer dress, with a gossamer shawl that floated behind her as she made her way to the table. With the Oraculon Reach being as balmy as it was even in the winter, they were all lightly dressed. "Is Liam done with his report?" Clara asked. "Yep," Leanne answered. "Some stuff happened." "What stuff?" House Beaumont's old faction got back together. Another faction made up of lowland lords formed to protect their food advantage. Old faction? Clara frowned, as in what existed before the Countess inherited her title? Yeah, plus some extras. Turns out it was why the Eight Fingers moved her out of the city in the first place. It would have been nice if they had reported this when it happened, Clara said. Yeah, well, they didn't. Leanne stretched her legs under the table. I'm sure Lady Albedo will have something to say about it. For now, our dear Countess Beaumont is mired in well, I can't even call it a trade dispute. Florine handed Leanne's notes to Clara. Clara furrowed her brow upon reaching the third page. This is a regrettably pessimistic stance, she said. How does this count as protecting a food advantage? What do you expect from House Bloomrush's vassals? Leanne shrugged. Honestly, I expected this kinda opportunism to be more rampant. Maybe they just needed some time to get their feet under 'em. Whatever the case may be, Florine said, the situation in the Azalisian marches has gone from bad to worse. The population already doesn't have enough food with imports being withheld at their respective sources. There's an easy answer to that problem and we all know it, Leanne said. Whether Countess Beaumont resorts to that option is up to Lady Albedo, Clara told her. As unfortunate as it is, the state of the Azalisian marches is the result of the natural course of events and Her Excellency has been careful to conduct things covertly so far. Leanne still had no idea why things were being done covertly in the first place. Riestize was already a kingdom rife with shaky allegiances, so it would have been far easier for the Sorcerer's Kingdom to bide its time while more and more of Riestize's nobility joined it of their own free will. It would have been a far more painless transition than the needless theatrics of the current plan. It took an hour to come up with a satisfactory report, complete with insights and recommendations for the Prime Minister. The report was handed to a shadow demon, who left to deliver it to the Sorcerer's Kingdom's embassy in Oraculon. How do you think Lady Albedo will react? Leanne asked. To which part? Clara asked back. To Countess Beaumont's new situation. I think that hinges on how she reacts to the upcoming famine in Riestize, Clara said. Combined with her dissatisfaction over how her collaborators in the kingdom have been acting so far, it may push the schedule for the main plan ahead. Otherwise, I hope she'll follow our recommendation and use Countess Beaumont as a model to instill some semblance of order into this third faction of hers. Something stupid is bound to happen if they're left as is. Maybe something stupid is the goal, Leanne said. That's doubtful, Clara replied. You know how needy Lady Albedo is when it comes to being in control. Leanne gazed up at the nearby towers of Eastwatch, which loomed over their delegation's fleet. The fortress city remained abandoned even after the Beastman invaders were removed from the Draconic Kingdom. With the human population as depleted as it was, there were no near-term plans to repopulate the area. As a result, all sorts of green things had overgrown the dark stone structures of the city, making the place look far more dilapidated than it actually was. It's almost noon, Leanne said. How much longer are we staying here for? We've been here for less than 2 hours, Clara replied. 2 hours that we could have been traveling upstream, Leanne said. According to Ludmilla, this Beastman city we're going to is pretty far away. Which means a few hours won't change much, Clara told her. We'll arrive in good time, so I would be more concerned about getting a grasp of Rolengork and its circumstances. It'll be half a disaster even with us in the picture. Even if we had the inventories to answer all of their food problems, we don't have the logistical throughput. It's going to be chaos. I'm not of the same opinion, Florian said. About the chaos part, at any rate. Everything we know about these beastmen indicates that they're very orderly. Even when Ludmilla was chasing them across the Draconic Kingdom with the royal army, the beastmen managed to stage a fighting retreat up until the point when they were completely destroyed. Their occupation was also highly structured, Clara added. They did the best with what was made available to them, and I hope that will also be the case for their homeland. Their meeting with Lady Shawk left them with too much to speculate over. In many ways, speaking with the Overlord was like speaking with Ludmilla, whose answers were generally brief and undescriptive, leaving them with more questions. Speaking of which, looks like they're back, Leanne said. A trio of figures emerged from the nearby city gate, making their way over to a rowboat dragged onto the flooded wharf. Ludmilla, along with Count Zulu and Count Kaio, rowed their way back to the ship where a davit near the stern lifted the boat onto the main deck. So, Leanne said as they came to join them, what did you find? There was no trace of anyone entering the city, Ludmilla replied. It seems that the threat of the undead is keeping the beastmen inside their borders, even if there are no undead stationed here. My fief will be a wilderness before long, Count Zulu said, Eastwatch included. I cannot say I enjoy the idea of my lands being left unattended. How do you even eat? Leanne asked. He still receives his stipend as a marshal, Count Kaio answered. Zulu just doesn't like that everyone else has been making steady progress with their own territories while he must attend to the army. It's better that he does, Ludmilla told them. Queen Auriculus has plenty of nobles, but few of the martial variety. A kingdom requires both to function properly. The half-submerged buildings along the shore drew further away as their fleet resumed its way upriver. Ahead of them was the deep canyon that marked the entrance to Rolengork, whose winding course obscured the view of the jungle beyond. Beside her, Count Zulu scanned the looming basalt cliffs. You sure you're ready for this? Leanne asked. That matters little, Count Zulu answered. Our queen commanded us to accompany you, and so we are. And it's good to have you with us, Florian smiled. It always felt a bit awkward that the Sorceress Kingdom would be forging relations with Rolengork without involving the Draconic Kingdom. There's still the matter of Rolengork being unaware of the truth of what happened in the Draconic Kingdom, Ludmilla said. Why you never mentioned that to Lady Shawk is a mystery to me. Because most people don't like the undead? Leanne said, it'd be an obstacle to our negotiations. An unnecessary obstacle. I call that negotiating in bad faith, Ludmilla said. Oh, it's not as if it'll hurt them. We even modified the ships so that the undead crews are completely hidden. The truth can wait until Rolengork isn't about to die. Leanne turned away from Ludmilla's dissatisfied expression. She always insisted that negotiations and exchanges be candid and transparent, which always either landed her in trouble or made things more difficult than necessary. 2 hours later, the canyon opened up to reveal the endless expanse of jungle beyond it. Her eyes immediately went to the tree line in search of settlements or signs of infrastructure, but the river had submerged the land as far as the eye could see. Well, she said, that was anticlimactic. I don't know what you expected after what we saw in the Draconic Kingdom, Florian said. There are major mountain ranges far to the north and south, Ludmilla told them, but the central portions of the basin are largely flat save for the occasional cluster of hills. Where do the beastmen build their cities? Leanne asked. Right along the water at strategic locations, Ludmilla answered. This basin has an extensive river network that the beastmen employed heavily. I lost count of the number of ships plying the waterways during my flyover with Ilishnish. Where is she, anyways? I figured she would have flown over to show us the way. Do we know the way? She and her friends exchanged blank looks. Their only directions were from Lady Shawk, who instructed them to follow the big river until they reached the big lake. Clara smiled and placed a hand on Ludmilla's shoulder. Rangers don't get lost, isn't that right? I'm not sure if that counts for places a ranger has never been before, Ludmilla replied. Also, being able to find one's way around doesn't mean that they also somehow know everything about that place. So we're lost, Leanne said. We are not, Ludmilla said. Ilishnish and I flew along the south side of the Oraculon on our way back. I know the way to our destination. Leanne looked around them one last time before sighing and plopping herself into one of the shaded seats arranged around the deck. An hour passed without incident, followed by another. At first, she whiled away the time doing paperwork, but she finished most of it before they entered Roland Gork. After that, she got up to pace around the deck, looking at what everyone else was up to. Most of the passengers were from Ludmilla's territory, and most of those were people representing the various companies that Ludmilla had chartered. The demi-human passengers still occupied the cobbled-together goblin fort near the front of the vessel, whose occupants continued to post sentries for some reason. 6 pairs of goblin eyes followed her suspiciously as she walked around the fort to join Clara and Ludmilla at the ship's bow. I don't think I ever asked why there was a fort on the ship, Leanne said. Clara told the goblins to make themselves comfortable, Ludmilla replied. So they built a fort with half of our furniture? Yes. I didn't know goblins were so militant. Is Nemel actually a hobgoblin? No, but you're not too far off with that line of thought, Ludmilla said. As far as I can tell, goblins start to act in a militant manner once they organize under an officer. It doesn't have to be a hobgoblin, I think lord types of most races will do. Leanne looked over her shoulder at the furniture fort. You'd think there'd be more accounts of this sort of thing if that was the case. Most probably don't register what they're witnessing, Ludmilla said. Normally, goblins are limited by construction materials and equipment. Their time is taken up by tasks related to daily survival, and the type of leadership they have is also a factor. The goblin armies spoken of in various tales seemingly appearing out of nowhere are likely the result of incremental progress that outsiders overlook. MHM. What are you two doing up here, anyway? Discussing Elena's diary, Clara replied. I finished a serviceable translation of the next entry. Leanne took a set of papers proffered by Ludmilla. As with Clara's other translations, it was filled with notes listing all of the sub-translations that came with deciphering High Imperial. Its complexity was no doubt the reason why it had disintegrated into the various languages used in the region. This wasn't long after the last one, Leanne said. Let us know what you think after you've finished reading, Ludmilla told her. Her attention returned to the diary entry. In Leanne's opinion, Elena Grant's normally bubbly tone didn't match the perfect angles of Clara's handwriting. Hey! Elena here. Looks like trouble isn't going away on its own. The late shipments from East Abelian turned into missing shipments. Then the missing shipments turned into complete silence. Not even the Orc ambassadors at the Zugaran embassy have been able to get any word to or from their capital, or any place else in their homeland. It didn't take long for the Imperial Council to order an investigation. The initial divinations were disturbing enough. Everything's been destroyed. The cities overlooking the Kekrian plain have been reduced to rubble, the forests they were nestled in uprooted and torn apart. The worst part is that there don't seem to be any survivors, and the cause of the devastation is nowhere to be found. But how can that be? Zugara isn't a huge country, but it's still large enough that even its one-sided downfall should have taken long enough for many of its citizens to escape. The orcs in Lagers still hold onto the hope that their families and friends have somehow survived, but patrols along the imperial hinterland report no sign of refugees. The Empire has communicated its findings to the embassies of our neighboring countries, but they're even more in the dark about what's going on than we are. For now, all we can do is put the Imperial armed forces on high alert against this unknown destroyer. I've heard one potential explanation as to what happened to Zugara, but I shan't repeat it here. The possibility is too terrible to imagine. Hopefully, I'll be back with some good news. Elena. Leanne looked up from the last page. She handed the translation back to Ludmilla. Well, that got dark right away. As far as I can tell, Clara said, the High Empire wasn't at war with anyone. If anything, the region was enjoying an era of peace. What about the places mentioned in the entry? Ludmilla said, do any of them sound familiar to you? East Abelian is the obvious one, Leanne replied, but what counts as Abelian now might be different from what it was whenever this was written. If we assume it remains mostly the same in the present day, Ludmilla said, the Kecrian plain can only be the grassland just west of my southwestern border. That makes Zugara the haunted forest on the slopes below the ancient pass. Is there anything that supports that idea? Leanne asked. The Kecrian plain could just as easily be the plains that the theocracy's founders settled. That would count as East Abelian, too. The undead populating the ruins in the forest manifest with demi-human forms, Ludmilla said. Many of them are orcs. I didn't pay attention to the exact distribution of undead forms, but I'll take a closer look when I get the chance. So what did we get out of this entry? A few places filled on their map. And the notion that a small country was utterly destroyed with no survivors, Ludmilla said. I also must wonder about the thing that was too terrible to imagine. Maybe it's better not to know, Leanne said. It could be one of those things that pop up when you mention them. What things pop up when you mention them? I can't say. She pointedly turned away from Ludmilla's glower. Clara gestured to the river ahead of them. Is that something at the edge of the trees? It took a few seconds for Leanne to spot what Clara was referring to. At the edge of the flooded jungle was an irregular shape half concealed in the shadows of the trees. She leaned forward on the railing, trying to figure out what it was. A small building, Ludmilla said. Perhaps a house that was swept away by the flooding. As the minutes passed, more structures caught between the trees came into view. Their construction was unlike anything Leanne had ever seen, looking like large branches woven into almost basket-like forms. They were barely large enough to accommodate a single beastman, never mind any belongings they might have owned. Where did all of these things come from? Leanne asked. They float, so they could have come from anywhere upstream, Ludmilla answered. We should be passing something like a city soon, however. How do you figure? From what I saw, Ludmilla replied, Beastman territories function on the same rudimentary logic as ours. Each tribe occupies enough land to support itself. There is a town for every group of tribes and a city for every group of towns. That's a bit too similar to us, don't you think? Rather than some sort of strange coincidence, Ludmilla said, it's more like a constant shared by all living things. Territory is required to provide the sustenance required to live, regardless of whether one is a squirrel, a wolf, or a human. The difference between a human and a beastman is that beastmen require far more land to live on than a human does. Does that mean their settlements are spaced further apart? Clara asked. It does, Ludmilla answered with a nod. I'm not sure if anyone else has noticed, but we've already gone by a few towns. Their cities are far more substantial, so the one coming up should be impossible to miss. The truth of Ludmilla's words manifested as they rounded the next bend in the river. No walls or towers marked the outskirts of the Beastman city. Instead was a thinned-out section of jungle that exposed an expansive sprawl of dwellings and the paths that wound between them. Roughly half of the city was at least partially submerged. In the areas above water. Come to think of it, Leanne said, this is the first time we've seen Rolengork's beastmen. That's not true, Florian's voice sounded from behind her. Leanne spun and pointed at the beastman cub cradled in Florian's arms. That little terror doesn't count. I'm talking about the beastmen in a more, natural setting. I don't understand what's so natural about this, Florian said. Half of their homes are underwater. There aren't any ships on the shore, Clara said, nor are there any signs of active markets. May, you know what I mean. Any information we can collect about their normal behavior will be better than the nothing we have right now. I highly recommend that we do not stop here, Ludmilla said. We are still close enough to the border with the Draconic Kingdom that these particular beastmen will probably have preconceived notions of humans, mostly as food. We all agreed that we won't be stopping until we reach Lady Shawk, Clara said. Any information gathering will have to be limited to distant observation. Leanne sighed. While they had agreed to head directly to Lady Shawk's city, which none of them could pronounce, it wasn't a very fun way to travel. The best part about being a merchant was being able to stop at every town and city, working the markets and mingling with the locals. While she didn't dislike what they were doing now, she hoped that they would be able to go on conventional journeys as merchants in the future. On the distant shore, the inhabitants of the city had noticed them as well. All they could do, however, was stop what they were doing and watch them in return. It looks like the majority of the inhabitants are Nah, Clara said. What's left of the inhabitants, anyway, Leanne said. The migration that overran the Draconic Kingdom was organized into monoracial tribes and clans, Ludmilla said. It appears that their homeland is no different. It's a bit disappointing. Leanne looked up at Ludmilla. Disappointing? Why? Because these beastmen have been around for at least as long as the Draconic Kingdom has, Ludmilla said. One would think that, after forming a confederation that functions as well as theirs, they wouldn't have to resort to such divisions. She was probably thinking of her efforts to unite the different races in her territory. For Leanne's part, she didn't understand why any effort was needed to bring different races together in the Sorcerer's Kingdom. No one else that she knew of did, after all. Individuals of each race who wished to mingle with others were free to do so. Trying to force everyone else together could result in more bad than good. They may not do so out of necessity, Clara said. It could be due to tradition or how their society is structured. Change doesn't come simply because it can, things often stay the same because people consider their situation broadly satisfactory. Or they're too busy trying to not die to change things, Leanne said. Speaking of satisfactory, what's with the buildings in this city? They're even smaller than those big baskets we found floating back there. Are the beastmen really happy living in those? It was difficult to classify most of the structures in the city as buildings. As far as Leanne could see, homes were either den-like shelters made out of piled stone and logs or crude tents fashioned out of animal pelts. They may not place the same value on homes as we do, Clara said. As far as I can tell, they only seem to be places where they rest. The beastmen are clearly capable of constructing proper buildings. What we see could also be temporary, Florine said. Countless people have been displaced by the flooding, after all. She wasn't so sure about Florine's guess. In the Draconic Kingdom, the beastmen simply occupied human settlements or made their homes in nearby copses. As Clara mentioned, they were perfectly capable of constructing proper buildings, so it was more likely the case that the beastmen simply saw their homes as a place to rest while they spent the rest of their time elsewhere. So much for Ludmilla's dreams of selling furniture to the beastmen, Leanne said. Ludmilla's ever-present frown deepened. I don't dream of selling furniture to anyone. I'll be satisfied if people can find a use for my company's exports. I hope that doesn't mean you plan on selling your stuff for absurdly low prices again. Perhaps the beastmen won't share the same opportunistic nature as yourself, Ludmilla said coolly. That the guilds hold no influence here already suggests that there is much to hope for. Leanne's gaze lingered on the outskirts of the distant city as their ships continued their way up the Orichalon. Whatever they found at their destination, it was clear that they had a lot to learn.